pretty tired now. I was pretty tired before, but I'm also pretty tired now. I don't know why. It might be just right after eating. I feel tired, or I have to lie down to digest the food, or something. It is 8 o'clock in the evening, so it's not that far off being, you know, pretty common time to sleep. Boopity boop boop.
What's up, people? Welcome back for another video.
Ugh. Anyway, um, just thinking about life and what that is, and the concept of infinity. And what that is. What is that? I don't know what to do. I'm tired. What I should really do is give myself more sleep if I feel like it. Instead of trying to stay up because, you know, it's the day or, I've had enough sleep by whatever measurement I think is correct. I need to stop going off what I think is correct and just start paying more attention to how I feel. Sometimes I feel extra tired, and so I should just let myself have more opportunities to sleep and not really think about time quite as much. And the reason I'm saying this is because as soon as I went to sleep again after a whole day of being up, I found relief from the sort of low level irritation that I was feeling all throughout the day. And I think that low level irritation was coming from me not respecting the fact that if I'm tired, I need more sleep. Because instead, I was trying to fit into an idea of how long I should, quote unquote, should be asleep for. I've got to tell myself again more there is no should. I guess what I'm thinking is that, well, if I'm asleep, I can get more video done. But really, the video comes out as long as it comes out. And if it's 10 minutes for a day, or if it's 10 hours, either way, it's not an issue. Not to me personally. Anyway, I've just been asleep for a while. And now I've just woken up. And I'm just thinking about London again. And what's going to happen. I hope it goes great, or I hope everything goes great. I think basically whatever happens, it'll go great. And I'm not worried. I just want to stay focused on doing my job. And that's this, making this video. That's the most important thing to me now. And everything else is secondary. So I'm looking forward to whatever happens. I'm ready for it. Instead of doing this vlog, I might just do a TikTok every time that I think of doing a clip for the vlog. Just do a TikTok instead. I probably won't do it instead. I'll probably just do it as well as. Damn, I fell asleep at about 8 p.m. And I woke up about midnight. Now it's 3 going on 4. And I'm wide awake. Oh well, no big deal. It's coming up to 4 a.m. Sorry, it's coming up to 4:30 a.m. And I'm thinking about going back on live, read some more book. So I'm going to do that. Just spent an hour on TikTok reading my book. And now I'm going to the toilet. It's 6:21 a.m. The sun is coming up. Wow. And I think I might just go for a nice early morning walk by myself. It's just about starting to become light outside. And I do feel like going for a walkabout. I've just said the same information just twice in 2 different ways, really, haven't I? Oh well. I really do love to look around at everything at this time of the day. The way it all looks. A little bit kind of blue. And it's just an aura. It's just a vibe that I like. I've always liked this time. is quite cold though. Man, I am feeling it. It's a bit cold. That might be it. I might just go back in. It was cold out there. I didn't like it. Came back in almost immediately. The heating is on in the house. It's 6:26 a.m. I think I'm gonna lie down, shut my eyes. Just woke up. It's now 12. I have no idea what's happened to my TikTok feed, but since yesterday, I'm just getting constant videos of women talking about feminism. I have no idea why that's being recommended. No idea why they think I'd be interested in that. I'm not interested in that. No offense to the women who are interested in feminism, and you know, that doesn't. I'm not even going to start. Anyway, so some of it's kind of logical and everything. Some of it's just, well, I would call it really stupid. But I don't know. There's narcissists that sort of hijack any kind of ideal or movement in order to make it about them, isn't there? I guess some people like to use social media to insult groups of people. Like on Twitter, for instance, there's a lot of racism that I see on there. And for whatever reason, TikTok seems to be full of sexism recently. At least for me, at least on my feed. I guess it's just it's women that are liking these videos that are just explicitly, targeting men with their sort of misandry. But I have as little interest in hearing that as I do men targeting women with misogyny. I don't want to hear either of them, really. Whether it's sexism from men aimed at women or if it's sexism from women aimed at men, I just don't want to see it on my TikTok feed. I don't find it interesting, and so pretty much every time I see like one video like that, I'll just block that person so I don't have to see their videos anymore. I don't think it's really good to try to sort of corral people into a hatred towards any specific group, because I don't believe that the group identity is representative of the individual. I don't believe that the individual is representative of their group identity. It's just something that they just so happen to share. I really do think the most important thing to pay attention to, or to create an understanding of, is the individual. That's the only thing that you can actually address. You can't address a group because there are no groups. I've just been reading my book on TikTok Live. This is that. Got a cup of coffee here that I just made. Just taking a bath. And currently frying up some food. In there, I've got rice, lentils, stock, tuna, beans, and just frying that up in some oil. Looking to get it pretty crispy. That's the goal. We'll see if that's possible. It's doing pretty good so far. I've been reading the Jimi Hendrix book, like I said, on TikTok. But my phone's now charging. I like to keep reading, so I'm going to read some more on here, on YouTube. Flying back to London and straight into a BBC TV appearance at Lime Grove Studios, brought the experience their first brush with authority when Mitch Mitchell was arrested for possession of a tear gas pistol. Airport officials were unmoved by his protest that it was only a souvenir purchased round the corner from the White House. Jimmy and Kathy Etchingham were still living together, although no longer at Ringo Starr's Montague Square flat. Chas Chandler broke the news that they'd have to move on because the lease had been found to prohibit blacks, something perfectly normal in that era, and Ringo was getting complaints from neighbours about the noise. The real reason was that John Lennon, shortly to leave his wife and small son for Yoko Ono, needed a hideout from the inevitable media storm. So, still in a foursome with Chandler and his now fiancée, locked Jimmy and Kathy had transferred to a fourth floor flat in the even posher quarter of Upper Berkeley Street, Mayfair. They'd accumulated so few domestic effects, apart from clothes and records, that no removal van was needed. They carried their own stuff the few blocks distance on foot. Jimmy was still sufficiently unknown to be able to lug armfuls of albums through London's West End in broad daylight without attracting notice.
The menage continues to work well, even though Chandler once again exercised a manager's prerogative by claiming the larger of the two bedrooms. Unlike in Ringo's Sacred Domain, they could change the decor to suit their own tastes. Pets were not forbidden, and knowing Jimmy's love of dogs and how much he longed to have one as a child, Kathy bought him a Basset Hound puppy with the pedigree name Ethel Floon that he called Queen of Ears. One of the first journalists to visit him in Upper Berkeley Street was Keith Altham for an interview about his song Burning of the Midnight Lamp, just out as the Jimi Hendrix Experience's fourth British single. When Jimmy proudly showed off his newly personalised bedroom, Altham picked up on the lamp theme to describe a kind of Aladdin's cave hung with lace shawls, tapestries, and great coloured balls of cloth pinned to the ceiling. The colour red predominates. Suspended from the lampshade in the middle of the ceiling are two little gilt figures of cherubs, one with a broken arm. Burning of the Midnight Lamp co-opted the most unlikely of instruments into the service of hard rock. During its recording at Olympic Studios, Jimmy began picking out notes on a harpsichord left behind after some previous classical session. The sedate little riff that he vamped ended up running through the otherwise raucous track like a maiden aunt in bed with a tattooed biker. Altham's interview was meant to translate the lyrics for NME readers, but they seemed clear enough. The lamp symbolises the loneliness Jimmy could feel even at peak rush hour in his bed. As he calls it, more than enough to make a man throw himself away. It's hard not to feel a chill of foreboding. The single did not do as well as its three predecessors, reaching only number 19 in the UK charts, and Are You Experienced, which Warner Reprise had released in the US after Jimmy's departure, with a few minor changes from the British version like the inclusion of Hey Joe and spelling Foxy with an EY. Received a cool initial reception. The New York Times called the album a nightmare show of lust and misery, and palpably shuddered at the cover image of Jimmy, Redding and Mitchell sneering out from beneath their bouffant hairdos like surreal hermaphrodites. The Times, in fact, could hardly have provided more of a come-on, and FM rock radio across America finished the job. Are You Experienced quickly rose to number 5 in Billboard's Hot 100, spent 27 weeks in the top 40, and became one of the Reprise label's most successful albums, outselling any by its founder Frank Sinatra. There was barely time to celebrate on the ceaseless treadmill of live shows in venues ranging from grandiose to grotty. This random selection from the last months of 1967 suggests the era of galley slaves or Victorian boy chimney sweeps. September 2nd, ZDF TV Berlin. September 25th, Royal Festival Hall, London, guitaring with Bert Ganch, Paco Pina and Sebastian Jorgensen. October 9th, L'Olympia, Paris. October 17th, Playhouse Theatre, London, BBC Rhythm and Blues Show. October 22nd, Hastings Pier Ballroom, Sussex, supported by the Orange Seaweed. November 8th, Manchester University Students' Union. November 14th to December 5th, UK package tour with Pink Floyd, The Move, Amen Corner and The Nice. December 22nd, Kensington Olympia, London. All Night Christmas Dream Party with Eric Burdon and the Animals, The Move and Soft Machine. December 31st, New Year's Eve's party at Speakeasy Club. Jimmy plays 30-minute version of Auld Lang Syne. January 2nd, Railway Hotel, West Hampstead. Jam with John Mayall and Al Sykes. It was for the most part of life. It was for the most part a life of exhaustion and monotony, of dreary car rides, bleary plane rides, bad food and hotels that almost always recoiled at the sight of Jimmy, even if few in the UK and Europe actually tried to keep him out. Here, musicians of any colour in funny clothes and afros were pariahs. Arriving at one grand establishment in Switzerland, the experience was surprised when doormen and concierges rushed forward en masse to help them with their gear. The reason was that a member of the British royal family was due at any moment, and the unsightly weirdos had to be got out of sight as quickly as possible. As with most other bands on the road, drugs were a fuel as much as a recreation. Along with pot and cocaine, just outlawed acid had become an essential part of the baggage as travel sickness pills. Since Monterey, Jimmy insisted on only the best Owlsley. For coming down from the high of performing, there was a newly marketed sedative named Mandrax for shaking off the Mandrax coma and cranking oneself up to perform again. There was amyl nitrite in glass vials that had to be popped under the nose and whose vapor rush turned the user white, red, then white again in quick succession like a stick of seaside rock. Getting high, Noel Redding would later write, became a game of Russian roulette, only instead of holding a gun to your head, you boasted, I can take more than you. Jimmy seemed to have higher tolerances than me. If I took 2 tabs of acid, he would take 4. Unable to endure the boredom of travelling and waiting around backstage, Kathy no longer accompanied Jimmy on tours and turned a resolutely blind eye to what he was assuredly getting up to. I gave him his freedom to mess around with anyone he wanted to while he was away, she recalls. I realised I would much rather stay at home in the warm and go out with Angie Burden in the evenings. She might have felt differently had she known that Linda Keith, whom she thought to have replaced in Jimmy's life, was still very much part of it. Despite Chas Chandler's attempts to keep Linda at arm's length, the two had stayed in touch, and Jimmy had never ceased to regard her as a blood brother after the ritual they had enacted. He thought of me as a security blanket because when we first met I'd been the one who took care of business. During the recent rash of European touring, he'd phoned Linda once from Sweden and twice from Paris, the second time sounding so depressed and insecure that she flew to join him there, and that which hadn't happened at her friend Roberta's apartment in New York the night she discovered him, nor at the Hyde Park Towers on his arrival in London, did so at long last. The one good-looking young woman definitely never in his sights was Mike Jeffries' PA, Trixie Sullivan, though when she went on one German tour, a rumour got back to Jeffrey that they'd spend a night together. All that had happened was that after a show I'd been smoking pot with the guys in Jimmy's room and I passed out on the floor. Mike was like, "What's this I hear about you sleeping with Jimmy?" But I didn't, at least I don't think I did. The deal with Track Records in the UK committed the Jimi Hendrix Experience to 2 albums per year, which meant that a follow-up to Are You Experienced has to be ready for release in December 1967. The recording sessions with Eddie Kramer at Olympic had to be fitted in around the Monterey Festival and incessant touring, and were still going on in late October. The album, to be entitled Axis Bold as Love, had many of the same elements as its predecessor. This time there were 2 sci-fi spoofs, EXP and Up From the Skies, both featuring Jimmy in the role of visiting alien with which he so much identified. Wait Until Tomorrow had a crime passionelle theme similar to Hey Joe, while Little Wing used the lulling tempo of The Wind Cries Mary to anthropomorphize Monterey and its altruistic young glow as a young girl with 1,000 smiles she gives to me free. Elsewhere, Jimmy allowed more glimpses of his real self than he had ever had before. Spanish Castle Magic commemorated the enormous Spanish Castle Ballroom in Washington State where the teenage Jimmy used to hang around in hopes of sitting in with some top Seattle combo. But there were no nostalgic snapshots in his almost controversial, almost rapping vocal, and the guitar took off on such drawn-out flights of improvisation it was nearing the frontier of bebop by the time Mitchell's drums called it back into line. Castles Made of Sand referred directly to his dreadful childhood and its greatest and still unassuaged tragedy. The little Indian brave playing war games with his friends and dreaming of growing up to be a warrior chief, that was all about Jimmy, his brother Leon says. And the young girl whose heart was a frown and who draws her wheelchair to the edge of the shore before she dies was our mama. The last time the 2 of us ever saw her, she was sitting in a wheelchair. Underlining the experience's democratic spirit, there was a song by Noel Redding entitled She's So Fine, boasting some of the most laboured psychedelic lyrics ever written. Her hair glistens like robins on a deck, and with a lead vocal amply justifying Redding's Jimmy bestowed nickname of Bob Dylan's grandmother. Jimmy, however, liked the track for the open G it allowed him to play, and contributed backup vocals and a breakneck solo. The sessions also marked the only known appearance on record of Mike Jeffrey, lending his shiny black loafers to a chorus of stomping feet alongside Graham Nash of the Hollies and Gary Leeds of the Walker Brothers. By a delicious coincidence, it ended the track called If 6 Was 9. How much more perfect for someone so adept at juggling figures. Previously in the studio, Jimmy had always followed Chas Chandler's guidance, but with Axis Bold as Love, he became increasingly assertive about what he recorded and how he recorded it. In reaction to Chandler's "fuck it, that'll do" approach, he turned into a niggling perfectionist. demanding retake after retake, which his monumentally patient engineer Eddie Kramer always allowed. Chaz was always worried because the studio cost £30 an hour, Katie Etchingham recalls. So to keep him quiet, Jimmy took over paying for the sessions himself. He showed more interest than Chandler ever had in the control console and loved to see what effects resulted from twiddling its knobs and sliding its levers. Other engineers would have regarded this an intrusion, but Kramer uncomplainingly shifted along and made room for him. He proved to have a natural feel for the desk and, for the first time, contemplated the possibility of someday becoming a producer himself. Whereas Are You Experienced had cost only a few £100, Axis cost £10,000. Almost a third of it was spent on a cover reflecting the current craze for all things Indian, a painting of Jimmy as Vishnu, the four-armed Hindu deity flanked by Redding and Mitchell, an indistinct profile. He accepted the cover made commercial sense, but said he would rather it had shown the other kind of Indianness in his family tree. The album almost failed to make its pre-Christmas release date when Jimmy left the only master recording of side one in the back of a London taxi, and all inquiries failed to trace it. However, Kramer, Chandler and he managed a remix in a single night. It reached number 5 in the UK charts, where the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper still occupied the top spot, powered by reviews like Nick Jones's in Melody Maker: amaze your ears, boggle your minds, flip your lids, do what you want, but please get into Hendrix like never before. For Jones, it was the culmination of all of Jimmy's blues, all his soul, all his urging, all his crying, all his shouting, all his grooving, all his everything. His triumph was marred somewhat by the consequences of that two-pally evening with Ed Chalpin in New York 6 months previously. Subsequently, Chalpin had filed suit against Jimmy, his management and track records for breach of the contract he'd signed with the PPX label in 1965. At the same time, Chalpin had realised the commercial value of the tracks Jimmy had recorded for PPX with Curtis Knight and the Squires, albeit only as a guitarist. Soon afterwards, Chalpin released an album entitled Got That Feeling, Jimi Hendrix Plays, Curtis Knight Sings. It's mostly old material spiced up by the tracks Jimmy had so obligingly recorded after their reunion dinner. Reviewers damned its low quality, but people still bought it, and Warner/Reprise put a stop on the royalties from Are You Experienced because of the Chalpin lawsuit. In a year-end interview with Melody Maker, whose readers had just voted him world's best pop musician, Jimmy admitted to feeling worn out both physically and creatively. I'd like to take a 6-month break and go to a school of music, he said. I'm tired of trying to write stuff and finding I can't. But everyone knew that Jeffrey wouldn't be sending him to any school of music, and in the same interview he hinted at a desire to work with a larger band, but keeping Mitchell and Redding as its core. Thus far, the Jimi Hendrix Experience had not been among the many travelling rock bands whom drunkenness, drugs or sheer boredom had driven to wreck their hotel rooms. Jimmy enjoyed staying in hotels, which he still considered a great luxury, and would convert the bleakest accommodation into a twilight den by draping scarves over the lamps. Holed up thus with his guitar and sci-fi books and women, he became known to Redding and Mitchell as the Bat. On the 3rd of January 1968, the Experience arrived in Gothenburg, Sweden for their second Scandinavian tour in 3 months. Having checked in at the Hotel Opalen, they visited a night spot named Club Carl, where they attracted the usual bevy of admirers and media people. No drugs were available, only alcohol served in Sweden's bumper measures. Jimmy, that infrequent tippler, drank whiskey, which brought out the worst in him, as it used to in his father. When Club Carl closed, a small group continued partying in Mitch Mitchell's room at the Hotel Opalen. Among them, a Swedish journalist who, it emerged, was gay. According to Noel Redding, Jimmy reacted in a manner outstanding to the bandmates who travelled with him for the past 18 months. He first made a move on Redding, then suggested they both take part in a gay foursome. When Redding declined, the atmosphere became tense. The journalist left in a hurry and Jimmy started going crazy. Redding wrestled him to the floor and tried to pacify him, but after doing it for the 3rd time, gave up and retired to his own quarters. Hotel staff, responding to complaints about noise, found the room wrecked, a window broken, and Jimmy lying in the bed with the hand that he'd clearly just put through it, bleeding all over the covers. Charged with criminal damage, he was forced to surrender his passport and remain in Gothenburg for the 2 weeks until his appearance in court, reporting to the police every day. The English-language court order would one day be sold by a London auction house for £8,400. He was fined 3,500 krona, around £2,500. The move on Noel Redding, if it really happened, can only be put down to the malign effect that whiskey always had on him. By the time the experience moved on to Stockholm, Pot had restored his equilibrium, and any doubts on his bandmate's part about his heterosexuality had vanished, never to recur. Not many women ever said no to Jimmy, but one of this rare breed was a Swedish student named Eva Sundqvist, whom he'd met on a previous trip to Stockholm while riding a tram to that night's performance at the Concerthuset. Eva was no groupie, but a highly respectable young woman, the daughter of Swedish opera star Erik Sundqvist. She had no idea whom she'd been talking to until she passed a record shop later and saw Jimmy's face on an album cover. In forthright Swedish fashion, she left a single rose and a note for him at the Concerthuset, and soon found herself in his dressing room, but that was as far as it went, as Eva briskly informed him she was still a virgin and for the present had no wish to be otherwise. Rather than moving on to the next in line in his usual amnesiac way, Jimmy had stayed in touch with her and sent her advance notice of his return to Stockholm. Eva attended the first of his 2 shows with her mother, but the second on her own, and when she and Jimmy got together late at the Hotel Carlton, she proved to have a change of heart. 1968 was a time in America when a black face, no matter how inoffensive, could get one beaten with a club by a crash-helmeted cop, savaged by an Alsatian, or swept away by a water cannon. But to Mike Jeffrey, such things weighed little against the need to monetize Jimmy to the maximum for so long as the opportunity lasted. Back then it was unheard of for a rock tour, even over perfectly tranquil terrain, to take almost a full year. This one theoretically consisted of 3 separate installments, but the breaks between them lasted only long enough to soak up a few stray performance fees back in Britain and Europe before a return to the United States, which each time seemed more traumatically disunited. The first installment began in February when the Jimi Hendrix Experience and Eric Burdon's New Animals flew to New York to begin separate tours. Burdon's nowhere near the length of Jimmy's. With them went 2 newly signed Jeffrey bands, Soft Machine and Heir Apparent, to act as support to each as the need arose. The British Are Coming trumpeted their advanced publicity as if the Beatles hadn't got their first 4 years earlier, though Jimmy was highly amused to find himself so classified. 4 bands coming off the same flight at JFK Airport might have been expected to provoke an orgy of strip searches by US Customs. As it was, only the Experience's new roadie Neville Chesters found himself beckoned to one side. And I was the only one who'd taken the trouble to look normal, Chesters recalls. I was even wearing a white suit. Their flamboyant American publicist, Michael Goldstein, has staged a press conference on the roof of the Pan Am Airline building on Park Avenue, to which they were to have been wafted from JFK by helicopter. Thick fog had grounded the chopper, however, and by the time they struggled into Midtown by road, most of the press had left. Even the canapes were gone, Noel Redding recalled. One photographer who did stick around was a rangy young woman with high cheekbones and rather unkempt blonde hair, celebrated for gaining access of the most intensive kind to superstuds like Mick Jagger, Jim Morrison and Warren Beatty. Her name was Linda Eastman, and in a year from now she would marry Paul McCartney. Jimmy was among her last conquests as a freelance. This first formal return to his homeland, Monterey, and its aftermath having been more mature, being more in the nature of a hit and run, would veer between adulation on a near Beatle level and the radical snubs and slights he remembered of old. Stopping there.
Lewis says he's coming round. He should be here any second, I imagine. I don't know where he is. I've been stood here waiting for a few minutes. He said he was close by. He said the road name where he was. It should have been close. Maybe he's taking a detour. Maybe he's seen someone he knows. Maybe he's gone to a shop. Who knows? Anything could happen. Well, he's not here. I don't know what to say. Yeah.
Now he's gone. Just watching YouTube. Gary eats. Just woke up from a very long nap. That's the end of today's video. Bye.